my God.
Well, welcome to the Atheist Christian Book Club.
Yo.
So who's here that's new? We have
Oh, wow.
two new? Okay, great. Okay.
And who is free will?
Still?
Does that mean you're an atheist?
No.
And who is deterministic?
Oh.
Or compatibilism.
I can't vote for
I
either
mean,
of
kind of. Me too.
Determinism, strict determinism? Anybody?
Not strict, no.
Not strict, but
Okay.
Yeah.
those. See, I
That
think
won't be
that
as
term
much
free will is
but
selfish.
like 100 out of 99 out of 100 or something like that.
Well, obviously
Yeah,
our
I
book
think
this time is Free Will by Sam Harris. It connected a little bit with our previous book by Anthony Flew because he talked about one of the factors for him is trying to wrestle with the idea of how matter, given enough time, can become sentient and thinking and eventually, become able to make free will decisions. And it gets into this whole, mind-brain dichotomy. And I think it's about a little, we're going to discuss it obviously, but I think any of us can agree, even if we were not convinced by Sam Harris, don't you have to admit that he does a job of showing that even if there's some free will there are a lot of other factors that when you start thinking about environmental, brain function, DNA, a lot of things that go into, maybe we still have free will, but not quite as free as we thought it was. So maybe that's a kind of a factor you have to give him some credit for on that. So.
And what was your name again?
Parker.
Parker wrote a little commentary. You want to go into that, Parker? What your thoughts?
Yeah, as I was reading, I took some notes, and at the end of it, I just kind of put all the notes together and gave it a little bit of structure, and I came up with 10 questions that challenge a little bit of maybe the way that Harris structured his argument. And I think these are really important questions to talk about, especially the first three. I feel like being able to have answers to the first three are really important in order to answer why moral obligation should or should not be pertinent to the discussion of free will. So.
Any thoughts on that?
Let's
I don't think he made number one point, actually. I mean, he would say, okay, you can see this
read it first. Let's read number one.
Okay, I'll read number one. Harris argues that all actions can be predicted before they are committed, given that enough information is given of the motivating factors. However, just because one's actions can be predicted, does that necessarily prove that one's choices are not conscious? How does this show that man is not in control of himself, as Harris suggests it does? If every action was already determined since the beginning of time, wouldn't that simply make for a better understanding of the omniscience of God?
Well, that's not what he argues. He's not arguing that every action is determined since the beginning of time.
Well, you kind of have to, if you take Harris's perspective.
He's saying that, like at one point he was saying that the scientists could see the decision that you were going to make a few milliseconds before you make it. But that doesn't have any. But
the
that doesn't
purpose of
mean
that was to
everything
go
is
even
somehow
further beyond that.
Before time.
If you got to the point where you know all truths and you knew all causes,
That's true.
you could eventually trace that back in time to the Big Bang.
Yeah, he calls it a wilderness of causation.
That's
which
not
has
what
one
this book is about.
That's not what this book is
That's not
about,
what
but
this
there's
book is
plenty of
about.
physicists that have stated that.
That's
It's a big part because we're talking about prediction leading to action, right? So you can take it. You don't have to take it back, but you definitely have to admit that prediction is a huge part of why he thinks that moral obligation is negated.
I don't think that prediction case he made was very strong to me, though. I mean, I'm on your side on this because just because you can detect this thought somewhere in your mind before it gets to the next level in your mind doesn't really have anything to do with the causation or the will of it. You know what I'm saying? If your mind has got compartments and the decision is moving through them, that's
it'd be your brain, you wouldn't have a mind.
Like one of his examples was about how when he wakes up in the morning, what makes him choose coffee versus tea, right? That was a big,
You would never choose anything different in that situation.
Right. Whatever he chose, he could say to himself, "Gosh, I have all these wonderful reasons why I chose tea this morning." But the reality was is those are all sort of based on subconscious things or you know, whatever. And he talks about the subconscious a lot, which is interesting, although he doesn't delve into it very deeply. But so that's sort of the arguments that he's making, right? That even though the things I'm saying right now, you know, it seems like John is deciding to say this. Actually, I'm just responding to the environment around me. And this was not predetermined since the beginning of time that I would show up here or anything like that. Had I been hit by a car on the way over here, then obviously I wouldn't be here to have had this discussion with you. Then none of that's predetermined. It's all a response to the stimulus around you.
Everything's a response to something else.
His complete point that you would not have been hit by that car.
Well,
Period.
I think he was working it, my understanding of it, Harris was working it the opposite way. Maybe the same thing you're saying, but in the opposite direction.
It was.
Every decision that I'm making right now is based on a wilderness of causation that I'll never be able to get back of the actual, all of the things that brought into that. It could be DNA, it could be brain function, it could be environment, it could be all these things. So when I think I freely choose, it was really determined. He even said you can choose, but what you choose is not a matter of a free will. It's a matter of these environmental and causality, you know, and you can't ever get back to the very beginning of it. That's why it's kind of like stacking turtles. It's always one more level deep, and because we can never get back there, thus free will is an illusion. That's what I got out of the book.
Yeah.
So
I don't
did
think
y'all-
any scientist would say that everything since the time of the Big Bang is predetermined, because there's quantum effects that by definition are truly random at the quantum
Can you
level.
talk a little bit more about that?
That's a good point.
That's good.
Well, I mean, it's basically, I guess, Schrodinger, whatever.
It's
came up with
Heisenberg's
that.
uncertainty
Yeah,
principle.
yeah. So the uncertainty principle, at the tiniest microscopic level, at the atomic level, things behave in a probabilistic fashion, not in a deterministic fashion. So there's truly random things that happen. So certain combinations of atoms collide in different ways depending on things that are truly random. But at the macroscopic level, collections of atoms, large collections of atoms do respond deterministically. So, you know, you drop a ball and it, you know, hits the ground and causes a sound.
He talks about quantum effect here. Quantum effects are unlikely to be biologically salient in any case. They play a role in evolution because cosmic rays and other high energy particles cause point mutations in DNA, and the behavior of such particles passing through the nucleus of a cell is governed by the laws of quantum mechanics. Evolution, therefore, seems unpredictable in principle. So that's sort of that's the only thing he says about quantum effects. You know, one thing that's interesting about this is, this is a book written by a popular atheist, but I don't think that this book is particularly atheistic or religious.
From my
It's
perspective,
about
it
this
seems
idea
like
of
he
free
tried to
will.
have it both ways, because he does say at the beginning, he makes a decent case for it, that even if you believe in souls and spirits, and if you have a supernatural worldview, that everything he's saying still holds true. You still can't get back to what actually causes you to have this, what you think is free will, and it could still be an illusion. But then later on he says the ramifications of this for religion are huge, because it takes away sin, it takes away responsibility, and not only the jurisprudence and the whole legal system.
He doesn't say it takes away responsibility.
Well,
He
as
does.
far
Yeah.
as the idea of sin being a
Definitely.
volitional act that you had a free will to choose to do or not to do.
Might be.
But he still says, for example, if you commit a horrendous crime, that you should be separated from everybody.
But for what reason?
But
It
Yeah,
doesn't
not for
matter.
rehabilitation.
You should be separated.
Yeah,
And
it
now,
is for-
it does matter.
should you be beaten? That's one thing he argues, right? Should you be punished? Would that somehow help? Is that important? So that's an argument he makes, but nobody gets a free ride here.
Well, I'm not saying it's a free ride. I'm just saying that the at least for the Christian Judeo-Christian concept of sin, the moral responsibility's gone. you know, because you had no choice.
Well, neither did Pharaoh have a choice to harden his heart.
I
Well,
knew Pharaoh was gonna
you
come
have,
up.
well, the biblical account, you have Pharaoh
We'll get to
hardening his
Hitler
own
in a minute
heart,
here.
and then you have God hardening his heart.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
it-
I mean, I think there's some some Arminian reading into that. I think God in that story was very sovereign. I mean, he was pulling the strings
Well, obviously
I
with
don't
Esau
think
and
that's
Jacob, he hated
talking about.
Esau and he loved
before
Jacob.
they were born.
Yeah, so they're,
Yeah.
you know, you go with the Calvinist sovereignty sort of thing.
Pharaoh was a whole different animal,
Yeah.
though.
but as far as crime and
like a puppet on a
punishment,
string for a while.
Harris is saying that if you understand the his free will argument, that you know, prison becomes merely separating the criminal that may again do something similar based on past action. You're just simply protecting
Yeah.
culture from that type of person.
Right.
There's is there rehabilitation part of that?
Well, I mean, if you can prove that he says at one point, he says, if we could punish viruses, and that was proven to be helpful, then we should punish viruses. But until you can
Kill 'em.
prove that, you're just fulfilling your own need to punish somebody.
So what did you think when he said if he exchanged places with the guy that killed a couple people?
That made perfect sense. If every one of his atoms became that guy, he essentially would be that guy, and he would do all of those things.
Do you think that was a little extreme?
No,
Materialism is
no,
very
because he would. What would make him not that guy?
Yeah.
Well, if every cell in your body is changed every 7 years, 7 years later, what's in prison had nothing to do with the crime.
Ooh.
No, that's not
Man,
true.
that's
But
deep.
It's still you.
Think about that.
It's still you. That sounds cool, but that's not right.
Because
I give
Well, here's
it
what
actually doesn't sound right to me.
he
But I
misses a
can't.
big
I can't
thing, though. There's
figure out
some
why.
empirical evidence that there is a consciousness outside of the physical brain.
Well,
And he
that's-
doesn't really address that. For example,
Really?
That's
people-
something that
Well,
our atheist
that
friends
is
An
do.
example would
that is
be
not
people
determined.
who are having brain surgery. They have to be awake, right? The top of their skull is removed, and they cannot see what's happening, and your brain doesn't really have any sense of touch, right? So you can't tell that somebody's working on your brain, right? Well, scientists can map your brain, and they can put an electrical probe, and you'll smell oranges or whatever. Well, there've been extensive experiments where somebody's in this condition, they'll put a probe in, and the patient will raise his arm. And the doctor will say, why did you raise your arm? And the patient will say, you made me raise my arm. But if it's purely just a mechanical process of the brain, where is that consciousness that's separate from the brain that knew?
Well, this gets into
Yeah.
the Cartesian duality. This is the whole Rene Descartes, and the whole idea of do you have the physical and something separate? Call it soul or consciousness or spirit or something like that. But I don't think any of our atheists would say that that's true.
No.
If there's something separate.
Well, it doesn't have to be God. I mean, it's just not all in your physical brain, whatever you
Even
want
if-
to
Well,
call
no,
it.
that's what
It
Sam
is.
Harris
I'd
says
say
is.
there's an immaterial
I'd say
part
it
of the
is.
human.
You get rid of your physical brain, and you're just a.
And I was just listening
Some
to
evidence to contradict that, and I
I don't
don't know the
believe
answer.
that.
I was listening on YouTube to a neuro, she said, well, there is the possibility that a consciousness could be universal or whatever, a nebulous thing. She goes, let's just rule that out right there. And she was just, it was so technical about, where in the brain does this happen or that happen? And she goes, there's no center of the brain. It's just, a very complex thing. And,
Compartmentalized.
yeah. But Sam Harris saying, this is it. It's just, what we have is,
Yeah.
the physical brain. There's no consciousness or soul, obviously. That's just, Christian and religious baloney, that we've been propagating.
Anyway,
Obviously.
But Daniel Dennett doesn't say that, right?
Oh yeah,
That's
how's
his
Dan
point.
Dennett?
That's his point, is that
Anybody
Daniel
watch the
Dennett
debate
says-
with Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris?
I did not.
So, articulate what Dan Dennett said.
Well, I'm just saying what Sam Harris says in the book about Daniel Dennett. He says that Daniel Dennett differs from him. And when you talk about free will, there's three different branches. There's hard determinism, which is what this is about. There's libertarianism, which is basically we do have free will, therefore we have moral responsibility. The opposite of this, we don't have free will, so we don't have moral responsibility. And then there's just compatibilism, which any Christian can claim compatibilism as well, which I don't. I'm libertarianism. That's what I claim.
You want to
But-
define that
but
for us?
compatibilism-
It's not in a
That's where he
political
says a
sense.
puppet
No,
is
no, no,
free
no.
as long
So
as it
define
does
it for us.
strings.
Well,
Harris did, but I want you.
libertarianism or compatibilism.
Mhm.
Which one?
Both.
Okay, libertarianism, like I was saying, is just we do have free will, therefore we do have moral responsibility. Hard determinism is we don't have free will, so we don't have moral responsibility, and compatibilism is we don't have free will, but you don't have to have free will to have moral responsibility. And so atheists or Christians can fall on that side, and I assume, based off of what he was writing, that's what Dennett believes is more.
Yeah,
of
he's basically a
compatibilist.
determinist, but he has a foot in the door for free will, right?
That's kind of what compatible. I don't know.
He says compatibilist, like my friend Daniel Dennett.
Yeah, oh yeah, he says
Insist that even if our thoughts and actions are the product of unconscious causes, they are still our thoughts and actions.
Mhm.
Anything that our brain do or decide, whether conscious or not, is something that we have done or decided. The fact that we cannot always be subjectively aware of the causes of our actions does not negate free will, because our unconsciousness neurophysiology is just as much us as our consciousness thoughts are.
Yeah. So all I was trying to point out is that, like, you can be an atheist or a Christian and actually still be in the same boat on this specific question. That's all I was trying to point
Well,
out.
in one of his YouTube talks, Sam Harris is saying, "Oh, that guy looks like that other guy," and there's just random thoughts that appear in our consciousness. And this neurosurgeon was saying that our brains are more active than we think. Even when we're sleeping, they're very active, and all sorts of things are coming into our consciousness that are not free will. We just don't have any control over. So
Yeah, but my argument personally for that would be that doesn't mean that we have no free will. Just because things happen that we don't control doesn't mean we don't have any.
So what
free
did you
will.
think in his video where he says, think of a city, and we all think of Rome or, Naples or whatever, Paris. He goes like Poughkeepsie, New York, or some off-the-wall city. That wasn't really in your thoughts, in your consciousness. So did you really have free will to pick that off-the-wall city? What did you think of that?
It's two different levels of free will. Like, really we're not properly defining our terms here, because what Harris talks about in his book pretty much entirely is a higher level of free will than normally what we talk about. Normally we talk about free will as individual decisions. Free will isn't individual decisions to Sam Harris. Free will is all the things that make you make those decisions. He says you can do what you decide to do, but you cannot decide what you decide to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
He just goes back one step. Right.
Yeah, but those two don't
It's the same
necessarily
thing.
have to
They
be
go together. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking just now, like the analogy you guys talked about, when you wake up and you decide on coffee or tea, right? So I was just doing a little brain experiment. So you wake up and you haven't made a decision yet, but someone's standing there. They hook you up to some sort of, something that can what did I say?
Well, it's like it's like
A detector.
don't think about rabbits. Okay, nobody think about rabbits or elephants. Okay, can everybody just not for a minute not think about rabbits or elephants or guinea pigs? Okay, thanks. Now, throughout that, did anybody think about rabbits or
That's
elephants
all I can think of.
or guinea pigs?
I think of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Or the state puff
There you go.
So
I caused the destruction.
we both did. We both did. But
I got the verb.
But you were going somewhere with your
I think
thought
it
there.
was Oh yeah. All right. So as soon as you get up, before you make a decision, you purposely abstain from making a decision. You get hooked up to a detector. Someone monitoring you. Now the person monitoring you says, "I want you to choose coffee," and as soon as you, ahead of time, whatever he tells you to choose, you're going to choose to do the opposite and go make that. So he's going to tell you, you choose coffee, and immediately you're supposed to choose tea and go try to make the tea. And when you do that, is it in theory, I don't know if we have the actual technology to do it, but in theory, would we be able to detect nanoseconds prior to him
That's what he's
actually
saying, yeah.
deciding to
Yeah.
go make the tea?
Yeah,
But
then
then
like
like
know
1
ahead of
second,
time,
I
right?
got a question. Jim, didn't you say, was it you last night that somebody said that some of those experiments are pretty controversial in the whole area of brain physiology.
That was Chris.
It was Chris.
yeah.
I wish he was here. Yeah, he couldn't make it at the last minute. But Chris was saying he looked into some of those experiments, and there's debate about it in the
Might be
science.
faulty now, but I'm saying in theory, would it be
Yeah.
possible,
In theory.
if it is just neurotransmitters, you know, going from synapse to synapse, and it's all electrochemical, it seems right in theory that we would know before
Right.
you even decide to do it.
That's what he says.
Yeah.
And by the way, he has a PhD
But how does
in
that
neuroscience.
how does that negate that you decided in the end?
Yeah,
I can
that
just,
would be-
I can
Like
drop a pen.
prediction doesn't mean
I can just, I can,
lack of free will.
I agree.
I can decide to
That's
drop
the
the pen, and then,
important point.
and now I can,
That's called
my,
a
but,
question.
me, something inside me can decide that I decided to drop the pen. And at that point, that we'd be able to detect.
Yeah, I can predict that Jim's gonna sin, but that doesn't make me cause him to sin.
I've never sinned a
So-
day in my life.
Yeah.
So, so
Because
for
the
me,
definition of sin,
so-
I've never sinned.
for me,
I've never
it's-
Depends on what is.
For me, it's an
No,
atheist. I read
What
this,
sin
and,
is.
and it all pretty much makes sense to me. Okay, you know, I'll buy into this, and it doesn't change anything about the way I live my life. There's nothing. I mean,
Well, if
would-
Well,
would-
Harris says it should. Harris says it should change the
His
way
book?
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
his
book should
he
change
says
the
you
way I
should be
live my
more
life?
gracious to
Well,
people.
that's because he wrote it. But I mean,
Well, you said you
Atheist
agreed
doesn't
with him.
mean
You
that
said
I
you
have-
agreed with him.
I said I agree with the book.
Yeah.
But that doesn't. But having agreed with the book, I can close the book and put it away and said, why did we read that?
Can we all agree this? No matter how you come down on the book, you cannot live your life that way,
Right.
even if you
I
try.
agree with that.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, regarding libertarian free will, how many people here could choose right now to go out and murder someone? Do you have that choice? Is that
I think we
what
all
you
Yes,
could.
I would say that I could choose.
Can
I
you
think
go
we
out
all
right
could.
now and do it? Do it for me.
No, I will not. I'm choosing not to do it.
Well, but
But that's-
even if you couldn't even make the choice to do that because that's not who you are.
You watch
I would
Breaking
say
Bad?
I
That-
definitely
that's
could.
not-
Yeah, Breaking Bad.
Good example.
I just.
That's a TV
But there's
show.
something about your
People
character
that
would
murder
make it impossible
people
for
are
you to go out and, hire a
different.
prostitute or kill another person.
Every
I
Mr.
think
White
it's just-
has a little bit of,
I would say it was
There's
more
Walter
chances
White
he-
and-
Walter White had a little
would
bit
not
of,
do it.
That's
Well,
a
but
TV
you're not
show.
being tempted to do it. It's not
Heisenberg?
something
Yes.
that-
we all have a little
pressing on your life.
Heisenberg in us.
Yeah, but there are plenty of things that I do feel tempted to do that I still choose not to do. In fact, that would be one of my arguments for libertarian free
Killing
will.
people who way down.
I would say that, like,
Advices.
we are culpable, we can be held to account even if there is no free will, because
That's
I've
if
got your
somebody,
video for later.
if somebody goes out and murders somebody, well, it's, if putting him in prison, punishing him or whatever, if that causes other people who are determined by their genes and their, what they see, what they experience, if that makes them take a second, thought about themselves murdering somebody else, well, then that helps prevent that murder from happening,
Right.
among other
It
people.
causes
So-
them not
yeah.
to do it, just
Even
like
if
we
we're living
caused
in
you
a
to think about the stick
deterministic-
proportional.
Yeah, even if we're
Right.
living in a deterministic world, we can still get angry at people who do things like shoot up
Sure,
a school,
sure.
and take
But are
measures
you
to.
saying that they're morally responsible or just responsible? Because there's a distinction, because compatibilism
Here comes the moral.
is
term.
is
Right,
it's
it's
perfectly
just the word.
fine.
I knew it was
It's
coming.
just, well, no, I'm serious, because Sam Harris
Morality
is saying
debate.
that they're not morally culpable. I'm not going to bring up an argument for Christianity or anything. My point is just.
No, I just knew we're gonna eventually have to define morality
Well,
before
yeah,
this night is over.
because Sam Harris is, like I was saying, hard determinism is there is no free will, therefore there is no moral responsibility. However, Daniel Dennett's compatibilism, still an atheist, very popular atheist, is there is no free will, but there is still moral responsibility. Moral responsibility.
Yeah, you can believe in
There is free will.
morality without
That's
being a
not
theist of any kind. I
Dennett
mean,
says
that's,
that? Yeah, free will.
you just grounded differently.
You know,
says it's compatible with
no
determinism.
disrespect to Sam Harris, and I don't mean to
I don't know
like
why you're saying
trivialize
that.
his book, but it's a little bit of a freshman dorm late night conversation because,
Denies determinism?
sorry,
Yeah.
did we not finish that? I didn't mean to step on it.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you sit here and argue about it's determinism or it's not, but okay, so if you take out everything that's deterministic and you got a free will, well then if there's no factors determining your decision, then it's just random. And if it's just random, how meaningful is it anyway? So
Exactly.
this is really just not going anywhere, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
I think it's all semantics.
Reading about this last month and thinking, what's the point of all this again?
I think
Because
the
even
book,
if he is right, we can't live that way.
yeah, the book, I took it to be, yes, it wasn't a
As though
major.
he's right.
It's a good, it's a
project,
good,
but it was a
it's
good
a good,
conversation starter.
yeah, it's like,
There would be no more prisons.
like I was telling Bill, like jokingly, I said like being in the Matrix, but guess what? I still go to jail in the Matrix, whether I know it's the Matrix or not, so why is my life?
How about
Well, it's just interesting to me because
someone that's off their meds and they
I'm a big blamer. It's always everybody's fault but mine, and the reason I ended up the way I was
First time
my,
I heard him say the truth in a while.
was my dad was in a wheelchair. I was adopted. We used to say to me, "Oh, you're adopted. I'm sorry." And I go, "Oh, man, I get a lot of knowledge out of this. You know, it's really, I got an excuse."
He
I
says,
lie about being adopted all the time.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, but see, I'm the opposite. I don't like to fix the things.
You like to be-
I want to be adopted.
Because then I can expect
So we
you.
start to get a lot of different conversations
Well,
going
then that's what
on.
he's saying.
Let's see if we can all focus on one thing.
So Terry, was there any way you weren't going to be an actress, or was that determined?
Probably, I mean, probably not. I mean, I did it all. Well, I don't know. That's kind of hard to say. The truth is, I worked at General Dynamics. I went to a law firm. I had acted in high school and in college. I woke up one day and said, I'm going to try out for a play at Theater Arlington. And he said, okay. And I did, and I got a call back, and then I didn't get the part. And I said, I'm going to get an agent and some headshots. And he said, you might ought to take some classes. And so I re-signed up for some classes. I took a few classes, and in 2 months I was cast.
Wow.
So, you know, the time was right. I had the time to pursue it. Had I been working full-time, and I might not have chosen to give up my nights.
So was it a free choice, or was it just you were destined to be an actor?
I think I really decided that's what I wanted to do.
You didn't, but you were free to do it. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean she wasn't destined to do it, even though she made the choice to do it. She could have still been destined to do it.
Well, you know, I was watching the interview with this guy Sam, and he did a great interview with the guy that played David Koresh. I don't know if you've seen the movie Waco. Fantastic movie, but this guy was homeless in L.A., homeless in New York, and he goes, "This is just part of the process." He was just determined. And then he got the Friday Night Lights part, and then he played David Koresh's outstanding performance. So he lives right there in Austin, so it's kind of cool.
Well, we'll take a break in just a little bit. But I want to show you guys something first. Some of you already know about this, but we had Tim McGrew that came and did a video for us when we were discussing the which was it, the
Bart Ehrman.
the Bart Ehrman book. And so he loved the idea of the book club, and so he wanted to, when he said, I'd love to be with you guys sometime, well, he has an opportunity in 3 weeks from tonight to be with us. So when we were in New Orleans, we shot this little kind of a promo for it. So let me run this. You ready for that?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is James Walker. I'm president of Watchman Fellowship, an apologetics Christian organization. I'm also co-founder of the Atheist Christian Book Club, a monthly gathering of atheists and Christians looking at important books from both perspectives. With me today is Tim McGrew. Tim McGrew is, tell me about yourself. You're chair of the philosophy department
at Western Michigan University, right.
In Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo, Michigan, up in the land of snow and ice.
And we're here in New Orleans right now, actually. We're both speakers at Defend at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary Apologetics Conference. And Tim was gracious enough for our book club. We recently looked at the book, Jesus Interrupted by Bart Ehrman. And we usually try to have, when our club meets together, atheists and Christians, we try to have a little video greeting from the author of the book in discussion, and maybe take some pre-questions from the book from the group. Bart Ehrman was not available, unfortunately, to be able to do that. But Tim has had some interesting radio debates with Bart Ehrman, and was very familiar as a Christian apologist with the topic of Jesus Interrupted, and was gracious enough to
come on and be interviewed for our book club, and I think had some pretty interesting things to say about the book.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to do that.
Well, Tim's going to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in March the 22nd, 23rd, 24th. He's going to be with Nancy Piercy and others as well at the Apologetics Conference at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. And I've imposed upon Tim, while you're in town, our book club would, I think, love to spend an evening with you and be able to talk with you, ask some questions of you. And now that I got you on the spot, would you be willing to do that?
Texas hospitality is hard to turn down. I think I'll be able to make that.
Excellent. So what we're doing, we're going to have a special meeting of the book club. It won't be the first Friday this time. It will be Friday, March 23rd. And we'll be meeting at the Watchman Fellowship offices in Arlington. We'll have our meal at 6 p.m. and meeting at 7 p.m. The meal's free, but we do need you to RSVP for that. And I've asked Tim if he would share with us for a few minutes, mostly to take questions, but we talked about just maybe 2 or 3 items in Bart Ehrman's book, but there's some other issues that we didn't have time to address. What do you feel like in Ehrman book, Dr. Ehrman's book, Jesus Interrupted, was his best case, the best point that he made about the Gospels are really not reliable account of Jesus?
That is an interesting question. So I'm going to preface this by saying, in order to make a statement like the Gospels are unreliable, historically unreliable, you really need to do more than just point out one mistake. One error will get you past a certain kind of, say, inerrancy, a certain view of inspiration. But if you really want to attack them as documents you can't rely on in an ordinary historical sense, you need to have multiple strong examples. And Bart has multiple examples. He's got this great cataract of them in the chapter entitled A World of Contradictions. The problem is most of those either don't stand up to scrutiny or end up being such small beans that by the time that you look at them, you're saying, wow, who would care? In ordinary secular history, these would not amount to anything. If you want to know what I think is best one is, I would probably pick the claim that John deliberately changed the date of the crucifixion. There are evangelical scholars who would actually agree with Bart on that one, so it's not a trivial case. I think that one's interesting. It's got some moving parts that are worth looking into. So if I had to sort of give him the chance to put his best foot forward, I would suggest that he lead with that one.
I know this is not, you can't really do it justice in 20 minutes or something, but maybe you could just start off by taking about maybe 20 minutes or so and just unpack that one issue. We didn't really get to deal with it at the book club, and if this is his best foot forward, maybe we can come back and revisit it and take a look at that. What are his arguments, Bart Ehrman's arguments, and then what are some possible responses to that. But then what I like to do, if you're open to it, is after maybe 20 minutes of unpacking that for us, if you could just give us, Christians and atheists, a chance to just say, open mic, any question. And we've had, this will be now 1 year that we've had the book club, and I've been able to hear, I feel like, some of the best arguments against Christianity. Mm-hmm. And we've had some chances to make some points ourselves with our atheist friends. But it still leaves a lot of questions. Every book club, we have people hanging around for an hour. I'm trying to shoo them out, but it's because the discussion keeps going. Would you be open to that?
So you're talking about like a stump the chump kind of thing? Sure, why not? I'm up for it.
So give me some ideas of some of the topics. Of course, there's going to be any topics open, but what would be some of the kind of things that might be interesting kind of questions to ask?
Right. Well, I'm very familiar with Bart's book. So if you want to go through questions from that, you can jump around in that, start anywhere, ask anything. That would be fine. And then, if you say open mic, open questions, you get what you ask for. So I am assuming that there will be some things coming that I will not see coming, and that's all right.
Great. Well, I really appreciate, Tim, you being willing to take your time for that, and I'm excited, looking forward to that. I want to invite you to you need to RSVP. So go to www.atheistchristianbookclub.com. I look forward to seeing you there.
Will he physically be here?
Yeah, in the flesh. Yeah, we actually,
crazy,
Sue and I saw him at the Bible and Beer Consortium. He debated Zach Moore, and Zach Moore basically laid down for him. What do you think of him, Sue? He went and talked to him.
It was good.
I mean, it was very nice. I mean, he gave him a little Texas hospitality. But basically, I went to Tim McGrew when he was at Sunday school class, and I said, this isn't a fair debate. And he goes, well, Zach's pretty good, and, I think I got a chance. I went, no, Zach doesn't have a chance. I mean, this guy's the real deal. I don't know if he's peer-reviewed, but, the guy is a real scholar and just a fantastic, nice guy. I mean, you'll really enjoy being
about the club. He just loves the idea of it so much, and that's why he participated in that video interview over Skype. But then he's here for the conference. Well, I found out the conference starts Friday evening. That's when said he was going to be here. So I called back. He said, "No, I'm not speaking." So I told him, "I'm not going to be there. I want to be with you guys."
Awesome.
Wow.
So this is kind of, I think he's looking forward to it.
Should we
Great.
invite Aaron?
That would actually be
In the same room.
because
the same
Aaron is under the delusion that Jesus never existed, which is
I don't know.
nuts.
He's not totally sold on that.
I don't think Jesus.
I don't know.
23rd?
Yes.
The 23rd? When's it
Aaron
start?
does.
We're going to start dinner at
Dinner at
6 and
1800.
7.
I guess-
At 7,
Somebody-
1900 hours. We'll start the.
I'll invite him.
And
He's never turned me down.
I could probably get him to hang around to do a Atheist Edge, like 15-minute.
That's not even necessary, as long as I can get a couple questions in. Yeah, we can just wrap it up all in one big
Yeah,
blow.
and you always, I'll give you access to all the footage, whatever
Yep,
we get out of it.
sounds great.
I wish this guy wrote more just general populist kind of books.
Yeah, it's a good
like at the level that Ehrman writes, that the general.
Yeah.
because he said. I mean, Ehrman's had 5 bestsellers. This guy, I mean, he's nationally known. This guy, he goes, if it wasn't for YouTube, nobody would know who I am. And it's sad because he's got a lot to say. I mean,
His wife has wrote a really good book,
Yes.
Undesigned Coincidences. And
Oh.
his wife's a scholar by. in her
We
own right
thought
as
about
well.
that book just because he's fluent on it too, or we could even bring her on. I don't know her, but I'm sure she'd be willing to. But I didn't think it was a topic that would be of interest to the
So
club.
there's
really.
there's a Christian author that I'm very interested in, who has won the Templeton Prize. You guys know that one, right?
Yeah, I know the prize.
The prize.
Who's the author? Are there Christian?
Charles Taylor.
I don't think I know Charles Taylor.
He wrote a book called The Secular Age.
Okay.
It's just 900 pages. So
not a problem for these guys.
We gave you a 100-page book, so I guess
Is he the same guy that did
how many
the
enjoyed
basketball
the
shoes?
short book that it was short?
No. But I'm a secular guy.
Uh-huh.
I consider myself to be. I only like to use the word atheist when I'm in a situation like this, and I don't go around atheisting in the real life, but I do consider myself to be secular, and I actually think that I enjoyed my church experience growing up, and I would love for there to be just a bunch of secular churches everywhere where.
What was wrong with that would be, but.
Well, there is
they have one.
North Texas Church of Free Thought.
Yeah,
I mean,
North
there is
Texas
a-
Church of Free
Yeah,
Thought.
which
We
has
wrote a profile
basically
on
been a failure. It never caught on. It's never.
No, it's not. I mean, don't say that. I mean,
There's
it's
because
been
there are
Julio was the one that turned me on to it. What do you think, Julio?
What's this, just a free thought?
Yeah, it's just.
I never
Let
been
me say
there.
this.
All I heard
And
is
in California, you have some vibrant free thought churches that have 200 or 300 people. In Louisiana, the guy that was
well, there's the Fellowship of Free Thought, right? That's
that Julio's thing has been going great. I mean, he had 30 people show up. It's fantastic. Yeah.
But the
Oh, that's
important
a-
thing for
But I'm not
for
counting.
me is that churches above and beyond charitable organizations have all sorts of tax benefits.
Churches have hijacked community, and that's one of the problems atheists have is they have not had a sense of community. We're terrible at that because we're all so selfish and the old saying.
No, it has to do with churches are very local. It's very easy. And I talked to a lot of people at churches. I'd go around and talk to them, and one thing they said is people that live 15 minutes from the church are much more likely to show up than people that live 20 minutes from the church. Well, we with the atheist community, with just a few of these things, it's just very inconvenient, and so I'm all for you have things like in Grapevine there's a jet skiing church. There's a jet ski church. There's motorcycle churches.
Oh, I know. It is like I was when I was
Cowboy
a
church.
Christian.
There's
It was
cowboy
like
churches. So why did those things don't have to have any sort of
It's
supernatural element to them?
ridiculous.
The
They
word
have
church
archers for
implies
Christ.
Supernatural phenomenon.
What he
But
means is
they're-
that's not
but they're
what
they're
drives it.
fellowships. They're
When I
people
was
that get
going-
together and they help each
Don't
other
go
and
to
they have a
church
good
then.
When
time.
I was going to church, they had bass fishermen for Christ. We had a bass fisherman give a talk, and it's like, what does he know about?
So what
stuff,
happens?
you know?
What happens in charities is people get burned out,
Yeah.
and if you're a church, you get wonderful things like a parsonage exemption.
Oh, sure.
Well,
It's-
now
it's-
Metroplex
it's simply-
Atheists are a 501c3 nonprofit, and they have some tax benefits and stuff.
If
like
Not
that.
nearly like churches.
Yeah.
Well,
Not nearly like churches.
If we had any free will,
You've
we'd start
got,
with it.
you've got
So, there you go.
Supreme Court cases. There's a case in the Supreme Court right now, given deciding about baking cakes for gay people, not and so there's things like that are specific to religion. Religion is it's in the Constitution, right? I mean it's you have so many rights that 501c3 organizations don't have.
And the problem with atheism for the future is these nuns, these young people don't care about anything. They don't want to join anything. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to read books. And it doesn't look bright for the atheists. I think they've done the projections 35 years out, and Islam is going to take over Christianity,
Maybe
maybe.
the church will walk into traffic with your cell phone like this. Listen,
And
Well,
it doesn't look good. It's sad,
We're losing our
Yeah.
local community. The local community that's there is churches, and that's okay. That's great. I would just like to see that extended out to secular things, bars, bowling alleys, you name it.
Yeah.
I think they're all fair game, and wonderful things happen in those places.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful things happen. I was in a bar last week, and they had a poetry slam, right? And it was sponsored. The money went to help rape victims.
Well, it was where everybody knows your name. Was that from Cheers?
Well, but my point is that it's only the mission that makes this change, and that's why I'm so interested in Taylor's work, because in Secular Age he talks about that. He talks, he looks back over history and shows us that things weren't always like this, and things don't have to be exactly like this.
Well,
How about that
We're
Russian thing,
going to take a break in just a second because it's about time. But I just, as a reminder, I know we have some new people every time. What we do is we meet monthly. It's the first Friday of every month. We always have alternate books: Christian book, atheist book. We've already got a book in mind that we'll talk to you about later for next month. We're not counting the Tim McGrew as being a book club, so that's just going to be an extra, no extra fee. It won't affect your membership dues one bit. So I wanted to say we have two new ones, right? You're new, John and Don. All right, and I'll just kind of see how we are. How many of you are? How many atheists do we have? Raise your hand if you're atheists. Keep it up for just a minute. 1, 2, 3.
better percentage
6, 7,
than before.
8.
That's good.
and
Right. Yeah.
That's 8. And then how many Christians do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We
Is
were
that
5
exact?
and 19 once. That was the
Yeah.
most lopsided.
We were off the other direction when Aaron was here because he brings a lot of. He has a fan club and everything. So.
We need to count James twice, though. We need to count you twice.
Oh, by the way,
Christian side.
James just finished publishing a new book.
Yes.
Yay.
Right, because of the help of Brady on that
What's
too.
the-
On Islam. What's your title?
The title of it is What the Quran Really Teaches About Jesus, Prophet of Allah, or Savior of the World. So it's really about Christianity, Islam topics. But part of it is a transcript of the debate that I did at Bible and Beer Consortium with the head of the Muslim Legal Fund of America,
What is his name?
Khalil Meek.
Because I know a guy who also knows him. I was trying to make sure it's the same guy.
Nice guy. He's a really,
We
really
got a
nice
mutual
guy.
friend there. Okay.
So let's take about 10-minute stretch, get something to drink. Everybody, if you don't know, the restroom is down that hall and first door on your left, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Oh, I think I got over yet.
Yeah.
You smoke cigars?
Do you put booze?
Yeah.
Then I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Oh,
And you have to wait.